travel person to attend this meeting. Maureen is coordinator of the Socio-Environmental Justice Program at the Henrik Ball Foundation, Brazil, and she is also political analyst, expert, and also Department of Science and Technology, India at IIT Roorkee. So, warm welcome to our honorable panelist and also to keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh Diong, Executive Director of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. He has especially reminded me to mention Fund for Responding Loss and Damage, not Loss and Damage Fund. Mr. Diong is a Senegalese and American national who brings over 3 decades of professional leadership and management experience in Africa, the United States, Europe, and Asia. He provides strategic leadership and oversight to the Fund Secretariat. Over to you, Mr. Ibrahim.
Well, thank you very much for saying the name of the fund. Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, as opposed to Loss and Damage Fund, which I know the LDC countries and European countries take that very seriously as a name. Very good morning to all of you. Good morning. Good morning. So as they say in Nepal, namaste. Before I get started, let me use the opportunity to recognize in the room one of the biggest champions of the fund, the COP29 president. We'll ask you to give a big round of applause who was in there. He has demonstrated not only support, but a commitment. I made sure the fund and what the fund does was at the center of COP29. And I want to start by recognizing his presence in the room, but also all the distinguished guests that are present here today. This is also an opportunity for me to thank the government of Nepal. This is my first time in this beautiful country, and we're extremely delighted by the warm welcome we received since I arrived 3 days ago. And I want to acknowledge that warm welcome in a land of generosity, but also in a land of warmness. What I want to do in this keynote speech is to share with you 4 key messages. And one is to acknowledge together the problems that we face when it comes to climate crisis, what is that we're doing as a fund, but also collectively what we can do to be part of the solution. And like in any panel, I always say to be provocative, it was some food for thought, which I hope the panel members will take on and hopefully give us some insight. How do we address those challenges? And like in any conversation, it's important to make a commitment. And I also want to make a commitment on behalf of the fund and what we can do, again, to sustain the efforts been done so far. With regard to the problems, if there's any doubt that we are faced with the climate crisis, I think the videos that we watched at the beginning of the session is indeed a reminder of the impact that we have on the flood, particularly in this part of the world, which has tremendous consequences in the lives of many people in this part of the world. But the same problems also happen in the Caribbean, in Africa, in other parts of the world, where the tropical cyclone, the flood, and all the disasters that we've seen here happen in other parts of the world, are such what they have in common. There's a human face to climate crisis. These are the lives of people who are affected. These are the communities who are actually affected in a day-to-day life and livelihood. But there's also the infrastructures that need to be rebuilt, and particularly in countries that are struggling to meet the needs in other areas that are equally important. So you can imagine this crisis is an additional burden to most of the countries that are actually faced with this climate crisis. And that is why this kind of conversation, not only it's important, it is a conversation we should have for many, many years to come to make sure we can come up actually with sustainable solutions in addressing this climate crisis. Now, the solution is a combination of actions. What we do as a fund is part of it, but it's a bigger picture. I think, number one, our fund has seen the day because of global solidarity. And I've seen some of the members here in the audience, my good friend Rajit, who has been part of the civil society over decades. They've been making the case that the countries are going to be less to climate changes, unfortunately happen to be affected by climate change, so therefore we need to come up with the fund that's entirely dedicated in addressing the challenges of climate change, in this case, the crisis that I talked about earlier. So the mere fact that that global solidarity has helped to operationalize the fund, to bring it to what it is today, it is a testament what we can do when we come together as a community to be part of the solution. We can move mountains, and we are in a country of mountains. Certainly that global solidarity is extremely critical. Now, that global solidarity got us to where we are today. We need to use that global solidarity to maintain the momentum of what made this fund actually a possibility, so that the communities, the governments that push so far to make this possible that we don't actually disappoint them, so we actually deliver on their behalf. I think the second part of the solution is how do we actually empower the government so they can be really on the forefront and making sure that we may provide the support, we may provide the funding, but ultimately for this solution to be actually sustainable, it's extremely critical that the government is actually at the forefront in assessing the demand, the needs. So what we bring in add value to what the government wants to do as opposed to the other way around. In my view, and I believe this is extremely important, not only for climate crisis, but it's important that we actually empower the government to be on the forefront in assessing the needs so we can bring in our support. I think the third area equally important, and that is that it's not just government. There's a civil society. There is the indigenous communities who are affected by loss and damage. It is extremely critical in our intervention, in my view, and make sure we can be inclusive and transparent in reaching out to those communities so that all of us combined will actually play our part so we can address losses and damage, as I say, because of the human face and will it affect many communities. Now, on our side, as a fund, we're also doing our part. And that is to say, out of the funding that's already been mobilized, what can we do to begin to at least initiate some early intervention so we can begin to actually make the fund relevant to the number of countries that expect so much from us. And that is why at our last board meeting in Barbados, our board has decided to launch an initiative of $250 million out of the fundings that have been mobilized so far, which we call the Barbados Implementation Modalities. And that is our way of saying it is important. We began to actually intervene, learn the lessons, provide the necessary corrections so that as we mobilize more resources, we can be actually more effective. Now, in that Barbados initiative, one of the things that's extremely important, and it's not just launching an initiative, what are the access modalities we're going to put in place, respond to the demand, the expectation of the countries, so that we can provide funding where actually needed, as opposed to announcing millions of dollars that are not accessible to those who need them the most. And that is why, as we speak, my office is working on the modalities, working with the different stakeholders, and making sure that when we're ready to make a call for proposal, we actually provide a fund that's actually accessible to those who need them. Equally important, and that is, as the moderator has stated earlier, $763 million is way below the demand in addressing loss and damage in the most vulnerable countries. It's in the billion. So as we actually initiate early intervention, we need to think about the bigger picture. And that bigger picture is the long-term resources, is intervention that can be effective, impactful for the countries, so we don't actually disappoint them. Now, food for thought, there are four things I believe that the panel will have to discuss, and I look forward to hearing their views. It's number one, innovation. Today, if you look at the global landscape in terms of fundraising, in terms of mobilizing resources, it is an understatement to recognize it's going to be extremely challenging to mobilize resources, business as usual. And that is why it's important, not only for the fund, but also for loss and damage, we begin to actually innovate the way we raise funding, going to philanthropy, private sector, all the players that could be part of the solutions. So that way we can continue at least to provide the resources needed in response to the demand. I think second, equally important, and that
Brian,
is
you have
partnership.
You have less than 2 minutes left.
I have less than?
2 minutes.
Okay, I only need 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it.
So we need to build the kind of partnership whereby even if the government is not going to drive a seat, we providing the right partnerships so at least the government get the support that they need in terms of capacity building and so on. Last but equally important, and that is, I hope in your discussions, to think about that not one fund alone can actually provide all the solutions. So in the name of complementarity and coordination, how do we actually coordinate with other funds so we avoid duplication of efforts as we intervene with the countries? My last message is our commitment to continue engaging with all of you to make sure we get it right. We cannot fail the millions of people in developing countries that expect so much from this fund. And as they say in Nepal, let's just make sure in the spirit of Nepal, no one is left behind, particularly the community in the mountains, who they expect so much from us. We're ready to play our part, and I hope you can play our part so we can support the most vulnerable countries across the developing world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Executive Director. Yes, only fund cannot solve the problem, but fund is very important. And we want a very strong fund office, and also we want our development partner walk the talk and put their money where their mouth is. In fact, the kind of loss and damage we have been experiencing, and particularly in our part of the world, is enormous. I will understand that no matter how big amount they pledge or commit or deliver, it's not enough. But it is very important for us to have. Thank you very much once again. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are very honored to have His Excellency Mukhtar Babayev, COP29 President. We have invited him to deliver a very brief message on behalf of COP29 Presidency. Very brief.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an honor to address this important topic of loss and damage in mountain regions. I wish to focus on how the UN and COP process is supporting action and what we need to do within the multilateral framework. Dear colleagues, we have been discussing loss and damage in the UN system since the earliest days of the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio, when then adopted the Warsaw International Mechanism to build capacity and foster collaboration. We acknowledged the importance of loss and damage with its own article in the Paris Agreement. At COP27 in Egypt, we agreed the principle of a fund. At COP28 in Dubai, we adopted the theory for how it will work. And at COP29 in Azerbaijan, we took the final steps to get it up and running. We understand how much this work means to communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. In Azerbaijan, we were humbled by the responsibility to conclude the process of setting up and fund. And we were honored to be added to the list of historic milestones. The full operationalization of the Fund for Responding for Loss and Damage is one of our proudest achievements from Baku. Moving forward, we need more contributions to the fund. The Azerbaijan COP29 presidency will hold countries to account for the promises that they made in Baku. Donors pledged to triple the outflows of official UN funds by 2030. which includes the fund for responding to loss and damage. And we want them to set out how they plan to contribute their fair share towards mobilizing the 300 billion a year by 2035 that they promised the developing world. We also need to make sure that the entire loss and damage landscape is working as effectively as possible within the resources that it has. A wide range of stakeholders play an important role in delivering support to frontline communities. This includes UN agencies, international financial institutions, MDBs, the private and philanthropic sectors. We need everyone to exchange technical expertise, share experience, identify gaps, and grasp new opportunities for cooperation. At COP29 in Baku, we also established a high-level dialogue on loss and damage. This will help maintain the attention of senior leaders, and it will bring different actors together in new partnership. We held the latest dialogue on the sidelines of the spring meetings of the World Bank, and we will continue to have an active presence to keep this issue high on the global agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, this work is essential to support communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. Mountain communities face irreversible losses from the glacier melt and thawing permafrost. The multilateral system will be a critical mechanism to make sure that we do not leave communities behind. In Azerbaijan, we remain committed to playing our part. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And I would also like to thank on behalf of Government of Nepal, organizer and host of this meeting for your remarks and also your hospitality during the COP29. Thank you very much. Your presence is highly appreciated. And now, I would like to really have more interactive dialogue among the panelists and also with the participant of this meeting as well. As we have heard that Fund for Responding Loss and Damage is the center of the debate at this moment, and particularly in the changed geopolitical context. After COP29, we are facing new kind of challenges, even in meeting commitment made by the development partners and many other member states. So, in the Sagarmatha Sambaad, we have experts from various walks of life to discuss and debate about loss and damage issues, changes and challenges. And first of all, I would like to ask a question to Dr. Rajesh Sharma. Rajesh Sharma, as I mentioned earlier, he is the specialist at the Global Crisis Bureau, UNDP, Thailand. Dr. Sharma, given your experience with the post-disaster recovery and post-disaster need assessment process across the Asia-Pacific, how can PDNA be better aligned with the evolving loss and damage agenda to ensure that assessments not only capture immediate recovery needs, but also inform long-term financing for irreversible climate impact? Dr. Sharma.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaki, for the question. First of all, I really want to thank the organizer for inviting UNDP to this very important event. I feel honored and privileged to be here. I think I would like to respond to your question in the spirit of the title of this event, Sagarmatha Sambaad. Sambaad is really dialogue between us to create new knowledge, to learn together, and to address the challenge collectively we are facing here, for which we are collected here, assembled here. Just to give you some background to PDNA, PDNA, as you mentioned, stands for Post-Disaster.
Dr. Sharma, we are expecting very brief, precise answers.
Yes, just I will be precise. Probably not take more than 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So just for the sake of information for everyone, it was developed around 15 years back, together by the World Bank, the European Union, and the United Nations. And globally, since then, it has been applied in more than 100 countries around the world in a variety of contexts. In a variety of contexts, when I say it's a disaster context, country context, capacity context, etc. And then there is a whole volume of work available online on this, so I will not go into all those details. But the important point I want to highlight here is PDNA is at the national level led by a government. It's owned by the government. That's very important. And all the decisions, what it concludes is basically under the government leadership. Typically, PDNA helps understand, because of disaster events, what are the losses and damages happen, and then what is the recovery strategy, which help us outline the future pathways, what has happened, and how do we recover from the event in a more sustainable manner. Now, given the context of climate loss and damage, there have been learnings in the past on PDNA because it was, as I mentioned, about 15 years back it was developed. Since then, it has never been sort of reviewed thoroughly and changed thoroughly. So there have been learnings during this whole process. One is, of course, this non-economic losses issues, slow onset events, and also another third dimension is conflict sensitivity. Disasters happen in all kinds of contexts. So there have been gaps on the PDNA methodology which exists as of now. And since last year, because the PDNA is basically owned by the whole UN, it was developed by the UN system together with other partners. So now the process of reviewing the PDNA process, integrating slow onset events, non-economic losses, conflict dimension is being undertaken. And it's being undertaken with the various UN agencies and partners. For example, UN Women is leading on gender issues, UNICEF and WASH, WHO on health. Likewise, number of other UN agencies are involved, and they are all contributing to revision and updation of PDNA. So this is an ongoing process, and we are very hopeful that by the probably early 2026, we will have more revised and updated version, which will respond to the needs of climate loss and damage. And we see very good connection there, because PDNA, as I mentioned earlier, is a process owned and led by the government. And then when we plan recovery strategy, which includes short-term and long-term strategies, there we also identify the financial needs. And that could be a pathway to connect it with the fund for responding to loss and damage, and also other sources of finance which the government can access. So I will stop here. I hope I was able to respond to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And my next question is to no other than Dr. Arun Bhakta Shrestha, who is a senior advisor to the ICIMOD. Dr. Shrestha, given the complex cascading risk in mountain environment, how can multi-hazard risk assessment serve as a foundation for attributing losses and damages more accurately, and thus help mountain country make stronger claim under the loss and damage mechanism?
Yeah. Is it working?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Karki sir, and I resonate, Rajesh ji, in thanking Government of Nepal for organizing this excellent forum and giving me the opportunity, as well as UNDP and my own organization, ICIMOD, for excellent design of this session. Right, so just to start with the context, I think we know the hazard environment is getting worse and worse. We have several events very recently in this region where we see that the nature, the character of hazard is changing. It is becoming more complicated with cascading hazards happening and multiple hazards occurring in a complex manner, right? So traditionally, we have been looking at one hazard at a time, which probably is not going to work moving forward. So the question about how multi-hazard risk assessment can contribute, I think that is something which I would like to start with, that, as the keynote speaker said, we need different kinds of solution. Of course, the funding, everything else is very important, but the methodological aspect is also very important. And like PDNA, MHRE can be a very strong tool to provide strong basis for loss and damage claims if it is done correctly, right? So when I say if it is done correctly, that means the MHRA methodological framework has to be able to, account for the complex cascading hazard natures, their interplay, which is not simple. Conceptualization is more or less simple, but putting it in a quantified manner is very difficult. And for that reason, at ECMOD, we are also working on it through different partners and experts to actually look at how to, in a methodological manner, in a model sense, look at those complexity. I think that is very important, and it is not simple, as I mentioned. The other aspect is about the climate, because climate attribution is very important, and that's very challenging as well, especially in this landscape where hazard is quite common, right? Naturally, it happens. So I think that's very important. So then again, I think the framework has to be able to account for it, through more granularized, more nuanced, look of climate change scenarios. I think that is very important through different downscaling scenarios, loss modeling tools, and then incorporating into more impact tools like hydrological, right? So to come up with what-if scenarios. The other aspect I think MHRA can actually contribute is in coming up with what we call the annualized loss estimates, which can be very helpful for government, the regional member countries in Hindu Kush Himalayan region, to kind of have a better understanding of investment, the need as well, in advance, right? So I think that would be very important. So, so what I would like to say that for mountain countries, MHRA can really, if done properly, again, I would like to add, help move from like anecdotal evidence to really scientifically grounded and defendable, claim for loss and damage. But in closer, I would like to say that, it is easier said than done. Loss and damage discourse actually is the late starter among other two contenders, and therefore we have much more mileage to cover. So having technical methodological clarity is very, very important, and that's where I think we can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shrestha. In fact, many of us, those who are in the global south, particularly those who are living in UN-defined least developed country, landlocked country, and small island developing states, we think that we always say that we are vulnerable, we are devastated, we are most vulnerable group of countries and people and community. But until and unless we are able to bring scientific data, valid, substantiated argument in order to claim the loss and damage fund, we won't be recognized as vulnerable, even if we are vulnerable countries and community. This is what Dr. Shrestha was basically trying to tell us. And this is what we have, those who are involved in the climate change advocacy work, encounter time and again in various fora. So our next speaker is Maureen Santos from Brazil. She is the only woman panelist, unfortunately, in this panel. Maureen, you have a huge responsibility you have to represent half of the world, but also respond my question, okay? My question is, given your extensive experience in integrating climate justice perspective into both international negotiation and grassroots advocacy, how can the fund for loss and damage, fund for responding loss and damage, Executive Director reminded me several times, be structured to reflect these justice principles, ensuring that the needs and agencies of frontline communities are not marginalized in funding and governance decision. Please enlighten us.
Thank you. Bom dia. Namaste. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the facilitator and the speaker and for government of Nepal to hold this very, very important dialogue, and I'm very glad to be here. And I would like also to say hello and greetings to all the women that's based and present here. As you talk about justice and the fund, the Loss and Damage Fund is created also because of the need of justice. No? There is a very important, the convention that was held in Rio de Janeiro. I'm from Rio de Janeiro. We're very young when this convention was signed up in 1992. They bring this perspective or historical responsibilities. And when you talk about historical responsibilities, you talk about justice, and how can you really bring these issues to the topic. So there is a need of persistent advocacy and mobilization for climate justice in all over climate negotiations and mechanisms. It's not only about the Loss and Damage Fund, but you really need to bring this perspective for all over the negotiations. The lack of a clear and comprehensive definition of loss and damage requires us to ensure that inside the structure of the Loss and Damage Fund, it embodies the principles of justice. This means not only structure a fund that only provides financial resources, but also empowers frontline communities to have a voice in funding and government decisions. So we must advocate for strategic policies that can facilitate access, like the other colleagues talking about, but also promote the technology transfer, but not any kind of technology. Because we also have technologies that create a lot of more impacts for these frontline communities. So incorporate also two aspects that's very important in the policies. One that talk about reparative, another that talk about distributive mechanisms. It's very essential to ensure that those most affected by climate change are not only recipients for aid, but also, as I mentioned, active participants of the decision-making processes. So when you talk about reparation, it involves the acknowledgement of the historical responsibilities and rectifying the past environment exploitation for our South countries. And when you talk about redistribution, and I finish like that, it ensures that the benefits of climate finance will be equitable share, particularly among marginalized communities who have been disproportionately affected by the climate change. So you are here in Nepal, and you know already how many impacts Nepali citizens is suffering about the climate change. And it's very, very crucial, and because this is very, very important to have this conversation here to show up how our cities can really be respected in the future to receive not only the funds, but can have the voice to participate on that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen. So last speaker in this first round of interaction is Professor Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta. Dr. Gupta, how can disaster preparedness and risk reduction strategy be systematically integrated into loss and damage framework to reduce avoidable impacts, both economic and non-economic, with respect to climate context? Dr. Gupta.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to Government of Nepal and the organizers for inviting me, especially having a disaster person on board. Loss and damage, I think when we use this term, addressing loss and damage. So one thing that, despite of the global discourse on loss and damage, how do we really perceive the scope, the length and breadth of defining the loss and damage? I think that's very important. And still there are some research questions, very fundamental research questions. When we say addressing, so I see it in two parts. One is that what we do to avoid or minimize. And second, how do we respond to what the loss and damage. Rajesh ji referred about the PDNA. So the disaster fraternity uses the damage word even, which includes the set of losses as well. There are certain sectors where we do not have the tangible, this kind of parameters. Those are included in the PDNA tool also. So here, what I would say, that loss and damage for DRR perspective is primarily that we look at that how do we address the residual risk. The risk that we think that we would not be able to address by adaptation. So this relates with the limits of adaptation as well. So here, then again, how do we look at the climate change impacts? In two ways. One is the shocks and the other is stresses. Shocks are often addressed. Those are in the media, those are in the policy domains, those are assessed also to some extent in a greater depth. But about stresses, in DRR fraternity, now recently we have understood that the stresses which lead to increasing vulnerability that make a hazard to be realized in a bigger size of disaster. I think that's very important, and that is still a gray area, and some good research, some good, particularly the methodological research is very much needed. And some examples of these stresses leading to increasing vulnerability for mountain areas is like, we have the problem of like the ghost villages in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the huge migration, the issues of livelihood, issues of health, particularly when we talk about the one health or the mental health kind of things, are the gender the concerns, several other things. Loss and damage, particularly for the major disasters like we referred about the Gulf, more than 90% of such kind of damages to infrastructure are related with climate change. And the majority in general with climate change, around 90% or so. So this is an important thing. And I would also refer the example from India, that what effort India did, and then the challenges also, briefly. India created a huge funding mechanism to address disaster risk. That is to the tune of $29 billion. For 5 years, 2021 to 2025. This is the last year. But if we see that how much has been spent, so somewhere around 20 to 25%. So that tells that there is a huge gap between the different strata, like we talk of the research, science and research, then policy, and then the operation. So when we talk about addressing loss and damage in reference to disaster risk reduction, then again, there are certain things which need to be demystified, that addressing loss and damage will cut across both the aspects. One is reducing the risk of disasters and also responding to disasters. And I think that's very important. And there, the final message, there we need to work more on the data systems and the evidence-based planning and the decisions. I think that's very important. And I am representing the government of India's new institution that is called ICARS, Integrated Center for Adaptation to Climate Change, DRR and Sustainability, which is mandated for working on the research, policy, practice interface. I think we need this kind of institutions. In fact, in India also, this was a discussion for more than a decade. Many countries, we are talking about this interface, we are talking about the integration of the three fraternities, but we need to work on the institutional mechanism and a robust data support system. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate your brief answer to my question. I am entering into second round of question, but in this round, I would like to really request very short, brief, bullet point, sometimes we call flower point answer to my question. And we are going to repeat a couple of issues that we have already discussed. The next question is, this is to Dr. Rajesh Sharma. You have talked about PDNA. But please tell us, how can we ensure that PDNA in climate vulnerable region, such as small island developing states and mountain countries like ours, reflect non-economic losses and contribute to the assessing support from the loss and damage fund? Because we are very much concerned and also interested to understand how we can make claim as vulnerable group of countries.
Thank you for the question.
Very brief, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So in fact, I just want to go back to the way PDNA is structured these days. They do include non-economic losses in a different way. Yeah. What do they do is basically they look at human impact, and also there are some part of PDNA where they look at impact on environment, culture, even human health. So those are the dimensions where there is a non-economic loss dimension, which is also looking at the impact on people's life, their well-being, impact on livelihood, social structures, which is, as you can imagine, sometimes at local level there are various social structures which are disrupted by disaster event, and then it is very difficult to for the society to have the same kind of well-being, cohesion, which was there before the disaster. So what we do in PDNA nowadays, basically we look at the deprivation dimension. We just look at, as a result of disaster, who lost what. We just count those numbers, but do not attach a economic value to it. So that's a gap right now. So now, as I mentioned earlier, we are revising this and then trying to bring this economic annual dimension with new analysis and insights, and so that could be reflected in the new version. So now we are also working on other fronts. Many times being at UNDP, we are working in countries and governments are requesting, talking to us and coming back to us to help them strategize, help them understand. So we are also working at national level to help them adapt PDNA to national context. I just want to give an example. Last year in Bangkok, we had a workshop on PDNA exclusive of Thai government officials. Now, because Thai government works in Thai language, so they have requested the whole thing should be translated to us in Thai language, adapted to Thai context. So this is very important because it's not good to have just something which is global. We need to bring it down to national level, align with national institutions, their systems, their policies, so that they can fully internalize it and then start making use of those kind of systems. So last point, here to respond to mountainous context, we are partnering with EC Mode here. As we all know, they have very specialized expertise on mountain Hindu-Kush Himalayas to adapt PDNA methodology for assessing loss and damage in mountainous context. And since they work in all these countries, we want them to be sort of helping the governments which fall under their jurisdiction to respond to climate-induced loss and damage.
Okay.
I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And okay, yes, we have heard that not only member state, but also our expert had high expectation from ICIMOD. So, yeah, we have also discussed about there are economic losses and there are non-economic losses. And non-economic losses are very difficult to count, but they are very severe and also very important for many of us. So, my question is to the senior advisor of ICIMOD, Dr. Arun Bhakta Shrestha. As we have heard that, okay, all of us have high expectation from you or every institution. What role can regional scientific institutions like ICIMOD play in ensuring that data, traditional knowledge, and localized assessment are integrated into loss and damage framework to support more just and evidence-based financing decisions?
Thank you.
Very brief.
Yes, it's good to know
Please.
there is a very high expectation, but I would like to start with that we are not alone and we should not be alone in this big, grand task. So it's about collective, action, collective, effort. Definitely, as the question has put it, I guess the gap is in integrating the so-called scientific knowledge, traditional knowledge, and community wisdom, right? So that's big gap. And we at ICIMOD have been promoting integrating on those. So that's something which we definitely at all fronts try to do, and we'll try to do that, right? And then, more importantly, bring it into the methodological aspect. How do you incorporate in, let's say, the MHRA process? I think I'm coming back to that. Beyond that, I would like to say again, while responding to your first question, the issue of attribution. That's a big challenge, and that's something which we have not done much. Even at ICIMOD, we have not done much. And again, we should not be alone to do it. So that's an area where we can collectively with other partner organizations work more on establishing more scientific basis for, attribution. Because that's going to be a big question when it comes to, loss and damage funding. The third thing, and that's final, is we are all in a shared space. Whatever happens might not always contain between one, country's boundary. And we have ample examples of transboundary hazards and risk. I don't have time to give example. So that's also one big area where ICIMOD can, contribute basically in doing joint assessment, if there is a transboundary event. And then that gives more advantageous leverage point for making a collective voice in accessing fund. I think that kind of platform also ICIMOD can provide. So these are a few things that ICIMOD as an institution can provide.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shrestha. So next question is to Maureen Santos again from Brazil. She is also a voice of civil society and think tank and people in the academia. Maureen, please tell us what lesson can we draw from civil society and community-led initiative to help make loss and damage response more participatory, transformative, and accountable?
Thank you. Okay, this will work. So there is a lot of alternative experiences and processes that the civil society all over the world and the organized communities in the territories is bringing us related to these lessons and community lead initiatives related to the loss and damage, and also to deal with not only the extreme events, but how can you really protect the climate, the biodiversity. We use too much this word in Brazil, territories. That's not comprehensive for all the cultures, but territories means not only the land and the place the people are, but territories including how is their reproduction and the way of life related to their environmental. So this idea of the territories brings us so many transformative aspects that should be prioritized, and these initiatives prioritize local knowledge. As our comrades had that here, there is a lack between this gap between the local knowledge and traditional knowledge related to the scientific knowledge. How can you push together these both really important kind of knowledge, and at the same time foster the sense of ownership and agency among these most affected. So we need to really learn about how this grassroots movement they are designing loss and damage responses, not only because they have already a lot of alternatives in the deal of this traditional knowledge, but because the policies and the public policies and the resources didn't arrive at this moment. So they need to be very creative to survive. They need to be very creative to bring a lot of kind of perspectives that can bring us also alternatives and experiences to our for more effective and transformative fund. There is also a reflection in the civil society, and in Brazil, for example, we were holding a lot of big events. Like last year, we had the G20. This year, you held BRICS Summit and the COP30 in the end of the year. So the civil society didn't want to look for all these events as a separate processes, but how we really can get to connection, the synergies and convergence between them. So there is a very important message that I think it's great to bring to the debate of climate loss and damage fund. That we really must to advocate for resources, but first, how will be the implementation of these resources, no? So when you talk about the clear definition, and you were talking about the policies and how the mechanisms will bring accessibility, but at the same time, hear these voices to participatory processes, we are also talking about how to mobilize funds and mobilize financial different kind of contributions to this debate. And one of them is related to the global taxation system. No? So there is a huge debate internationally about that. So how you tax illegal transference of money, how can you take these aspects that will possibilitate in the G20, in this new convention of international taxation, and also connect to the climate does finance. So loss and damage funds also should be part of that. And as we don't have more time to hear, there is a lot of other proposals that I think could be very important, and I hope can see you in Belém and in COP30, and also from the civil society and organize for the People Summit that you do in parallel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Last but not least, before us is Professor Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta. We have heard that, okay, the claim we want to make on loss and found are very challenging, both economic and non-economic. But please tell us, how do you see as an expert key challenges of methods and approaches on disaster-related loss and damage in view of non-economic impacts of climate change?
Thank you for bringing this question, very important aspect of non-economic loss and damage. First of all, I largely disagree with this term using non-economic. It is our failure to understand the economics behind each and every type of impact the climate change plays. And if we just dig deeper, we will find some case studies, maybe not perfect, but maybe some community worker or some academician, some researcher in civil society might have done some kind of research, and we find that. Basically, it's important that we dig deeper, we find out those. And I would say that this is a lateral economics. So sometimes it is not the formal economic system, it's a informal or the lateral economic system. The economic parameters take the front seats, and non-economic aspects are not recognized to that extent by the social systems or the socio-political systems. Primarily in the developing nations are the less developed countries, because I would also link with the short cycle of this election-based governance also. Because we want to showcase something which is more tangible, which is more, can be rated higher in terms of the economic achievement. So there we will have to work that how the global thought process, how the thought process of for example, now we have under the COP mechanisms, that we take in a more operational way, and try to identify and create more localization models. Because even if we really want to address the loss and damage related issues or adaptation related issues, and then refer to mountain context, even the other geographies and the mountain context would be varying. And then within mountain context also, if I talk of India, then we have Ladakh, which is a cold desert, and we have the other states. So we will have to come up with the specific different models for this. And the last, I would say that message on this for me is that basically we also look at the current planning regimes at local level. For example, districts or so. In India, we have now all the districts are required to come up with a disaster management plan. We have the financial mechanism also. Now we are asking all the states have a climate change adaptation plan. Now we are asking districts to come up with climate change adaptation plan. The Supreme Court asked all the districts to come up with environmental action plan. Now under the National Program on Health in view of climate change, we are asking the districts to come up with health adaptation plan. And if we see this mechanism of going the sectoral approach also, that will provide some opportunity to find out some mechanisms, approaches, and also some tools to find out the ideas that we address so-called non-economic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. In fact, something new to all of us is, we often call non-economic, but all non-economic losses are economic losses also, because it will have implication in economy of life and livelihood of the people, particularly those who are living in the most vulnerable countries and communities. So thank you very much for reminding us all non-economic losses are economic loss, in fact. Perhaps, our statistician, economist may not be able to calculate that in a way. Ordinary peoples or people living in vulnerable places and community understand it. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I understand that we are running out of time, but I would like to really open the floor for discussion. And I'm very much hopeful that you all would agree with me. I want to give priority to youth and women. And then policymakers, export later, okay? So, woman, please.
Thank you very much.
Very brief,
yes,
madam.
My question is to Mr. Ibrahim. My question is, what strategies...
Will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm called Marina Nino. I'm from the government of Uganda. I'm the focal person for mountains in sub-Saharan Africa. My question is, what strategies do you have in place to make it easy, cheap, and quick to access the loss and damage? Because why should you have, for example, I'm using an example of GCF. It takes over 3 years to access the GCF funds. Now, you already have people who have lost houses, they've lost lives, they've lost their livelihoods. If it's going to take over a year to access the loss and damage, then it will not be very useful. So what plans do you have for that? But also, what plans do you have for the actual communities to access the funds by themselves? Thank you, madam.
You made your point clear. We need support yesterday, no? Not today. And we cannot wait for another 6 months. Madam, from South Africa.
Thank you very much.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Tasnim Esop, and I am from South Africa, but I also head Climate Action Network International, a large global network of civil society. And why I mention that is exactly the question that I would like to ask the executive director of the fund. We call it the Loss and Damage Fund.
Fund for responding loss and damage.
We call it the Loss and Damage Fund because it was civil society that actually decided to escalate the fight to win that fund. And we did that in a matter of 2 years after decades of negotiations to land that fund with, of course, supporting governments. I'm sure you will acknowledge that because that was very clear. Now, we fought for it because it was about justice. Achieving justice for those most vulnerable in the world but least responsible for the climate crisis. What I am concerned about, therefore, is that the issue of justice remains central to the objectives of that fund. And so when we talk about mobilizing finance, and we talk about innovations, and we talk about the private sector role, etc., there's going to be a tendency that we reduce the justice element.
Please brief.
My last point is, it is possible in this world to mobilize funding just like this for wars. It is possible to mobilize funding for things that do harm in the world. So it's not about when developed countries, rich nations say they don't have money. And we have to be sitting back and accept that. We must challenge this as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you very much.
She's my friend. That's why I can cut her off. The next, you, madam, young lady. Oh, no. Okay.
Hello.
Please introduce.
Yeah, namaste. My name is Roshni Gurung. Thank you very much for all the great talks.
Very brave, no statement,
sure.
but question.
Awesome. The evidence of climate-induced loss and damage from glacier melt and landslides in the high mountains to floods and displacement in the Tarai Plains is clear and growing. As Dr. Anil said, much of this loss is not just economic, but also cultural, emotional, and ecological, and often immeasurable. As a young person speaking for the vulnerable communities at the ground realities, I would like to ask, how can we ensure that the loss and damage in the mountains is adequately recognized, addressed, and financed? What mechanisms must be strengthened or created to channel real support, especially in finance and knowledge sharing, to the frontline communities who need it the most? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Gurung. Secretary Madhu.
Well, thank you, Dr. Karki, for this opportunity, and great hearing to all the experts. So since I am a finance guy, obviously I'll have a query on finance, right? So, Mr. Ibrahim, so the total pledge for the loss and damage fund so far has been 768 million, so far I know. And the signed agreement has been 495 million, please correct me if I'm wrong. And the paid in funds is only 321 million. And as you just informed us that through this Barbados implementation modalities, you have already allocated 250 millions, right? Okay, so now we have only 71 million available, right, in the fund so far, right? And
Secretary, question.
Yeah,
please.
okay. The question is that the estimation for the loss and damage fund was around 400 billion per annum. So far, I understand. So there is such a huge financing gap. And given the change context, since the US withdrawal from the USAID and the UK is scaling down the grant money, because we wanted grant money in the fund. May not want the loan or credits or private money in the fund. So how do you, what is the exercise or work that you've been doing to meet this huge funding gap in loss and damage, considering the changing context of global aid dynamics?
Thank you, Secretary Madhu Marasene. I would like to give floor to the disaster guy, Anil. Anil, and then you next. Please introduce yourself.
जलवायु परिवर्तन सम्बन्धी धेरै सम्मेलनहरू भयो, तर न्यूनीकरण सम्बन्धमा विश्व नै संवेदन हुन सकेन। अहिले नेपाल लगायत विश्व नै डटेलो मुक्त घोषणा गर्नुपर्छ। अनि यो अर्को चाहिँ प्लास्टिक लगाएर सिसाहरू कन्ट्रोल गर्दै लानुपर्छ। म स्वयं स्थानीय सरकारको
Do you have volunteer to translate that?
सुमनुब्री गाउँपालिका, सुन्नुहोस् है, सुमनुब्री गाउँपालिका स्थानीय सरकारले डटेलो मुक्त क्षेत्र घोषणा गरेको छ, सिसा मुक्त क्षेत्र घोषणा गरेको छ।
तपाईको प्रश्न कसलाई हो? प्रश्न मात्रै सोध्नु।
अनि मैले प्रश्न चाहिँ सम्बन्धित सरोकारलाई विश्व नै एउटा न्यूनीकरणको सवालमा चाहिँ संवेदनशील हुनुपर्छ भन्ने प्रश्न हो। अहिलेसम्म त्यो न्यूनीकरण सम्बन्धमा चाहिँ संवेदनशील हुन सकेन। सम्मेलन धेरै भयो, छलफल धेरै भयो, बहस धेरै भयो, खै त न्यूनीकरणलाई प्रोसेस गरेको? विश्वमा जहाँसुकै आगलागी भइरहेछ त्यो कन्ट्रोल गर्ने खै त माध्यम। त्यसकारण न्यूनीकरणको लागि एउटा संवेदनशील हुनुपर्छ भन्ने हाम्रो मान्यता रहेको छ।
धन्यवाद तपाईलाई। अनिलजीलाई दिनुहोस् त पछाडि, तपाईको पछाडि उहाँलाई, अनि तपाईँ पछि।
Thank you, Dr. Arjun Karki. My question is to Ibrahim. Last year in September, we saw a massive...
Please introduce who are you.
My name is Anil Pukhrel. I used to head Nepal's National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority. Last year, we experienced an unprecedented flood that was attributed to climate change. the total damage and loss was something more than $500 million. We've hardly been able to raise even 10% of that finances. My question is, how could countries like Nepal access to the loss and damage finances on a fast-track basis, unlike GCF, where it takes ages, like 6 years just to get a project board approved? What you want is the money now, the $760 million, or even half of that, distributed to these high-risk countries such as Nepal with high mountain risks. So how could countries like Nepal really access on a fast-track basis within less than a year?
Thank you, Anil. Thank you. The next gentleman, yeah.
Namaste. My name is Frinjin Gurung. Rural.
Very brief, please. We are running out of time.
गाउँपालिकाको अध्यक्ष नेपालीमा भन्दा अलि सहज होला मेरो सिम्पल क्वेशन हो जसरी नेपाल देशले चाहिँ विश्व सामुमा चाहिँ लस एन्ड ड्यामेज फन्डको चाहिँ जुन चाहिँ माग राखिएको छ स्थानीय सरकारले जसरी चाहिँ आफ्नो स्थानीय स्तरमा तपाईहरुलाई म कागबिनीको चाहिँ बाढी पहिरोको एउटा कुरा चाहिँ स्मरण गराउन चाहन्छु त्यसमा चाहिँ नेपाल सरकारले विश्वबाट लस एन्ड ड्यामेज फन्ड प्राप्त गरिसकेपछि मेरो चाहिँ स्थानीय सरकारका चाहिँ पोलिसी मेकरलाई हो ती लस एन्ड ड्यामेज फन्ड मार्फत चाहिँ स्थानीय सरकारहरूलाई चाहिँ डाइरेक्टली एक्सेस हुनुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ मेरो माग हो यति
धन्यवाद धन्यवाद इनफ्याक्ट ही रिप्रेजेन्ट्स लोकल गभर्नमेन्ट authority and his demand is we should have a direct access to loss and damage fund. Thank you very much, young lady there. Yes.
My name is Bhagwati Nirupane, member of National Assembly, Chief Whip, CPN UEML. I am going to ask one question. Anyone can give answer of my question. Recently, Glacier Lake outburst. Communities displaced of it, hoping that infrastructure development play in mountain degradation. My question is, how can indigenous knowledge help reduce loss and damage in mountain? What funding mechanism support loss and damage recovery in highland areas? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Member of Parliament. I am going to take 3 more questions. There are 3 young, very enthusiastic ladies there. Let them speak first, and then I'll come to you second round. Please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Vivishika. I'm from UN Women. My question is to Mr. Ibrahim and also perhaps Dr. Rajesh as well.
Very brief.
How are, if not how should, intangible losses, especially faced by women, like the care burden and the care economy, be integrated and considered in loss and damage funding mechanisms and also in assessments like the PDNA? Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Kriti Shrestha, working for DCA Nepal. My question is to Mr. Ibrahim. So I'm more worried about, when I was hearing this discussion revolved around SOX. What I'm worried about is how does FRLD prioritize stressors, for example, drought, and also the non-economic losses or damages due to those stresses, because stresses are generally slow and very much impactful than the shocks, which are more rapid and extreme in nature. So what is the mechanism for assessment, as well as also for what is the approach of FRLD for climate-related stresses? Thank you
very much, sir. Please, last.
Hi, namaste everyone. My name is Tashi, and I'm from Limi Valley, Humla district, known for being one of the poorest districts, unfortunately. My question is to Mr. Ibrahima. I want to tell everybody here that just 2 days ago, my village was hit with Glacier Lake outburst flood, and it resulted in more than 10 million Nepali rupees damages in physical infrastructural damages. I was just at the conference about the science of risk management and all, and then they said that. Okay, so my question is, how to access loss and damages when you do not have a scientific evidence to show the data, when on the other hand you have a real people suffering there and their infrastructure damages being carried away. The science there was saying that they only do research about the generic stuff and not specific community to community. Whereas here, when it comes to accessing the fund, you need to present a data. So there is a huge gap here. Some places, like let's say Everest region, are over-researched, whereas so many places are under-researched. Therefore, we have a data gap here, evidence data gap here, and it's difficult to access money to get the
Thank you,
ground-level
madam.
intervention.
I think you have made your point. Okay. See, we are running out of time, but I would like to really give only time to two speakers. One gentleman here, the lady there. Then I will try to give floor to the fellow panelists here and keynote speaker. Gentleman here, yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Malay Fafana. I'm the Asia Regional Director for DGI on Global Institution on Green Growth. It's not a question. It's just a contribution. Just to remind us we can just not lose focus, and we can have a lot of people around this room. My question is how we in the room can make the loss and damage fund successful. That's my question.
Thank you. You are asking question to us. Madam here. Last. Yeah.
Namaste and good morning, everyone. I'm Swati Thapa. I'm a development professional working in the environment sector. I'm also the Central Committee member of National Democratic Party. My question is to Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta. Is there any possibility or is there any good practices where the concept of virtual university has been implemented? Like the local people at the local ground, they need like local knowledge. So the curriculum should be based on the local context. So my question is, the people who has made the curriculum from outside would not be that much helpful to local people to address the local issues. Is there any good practices? My question is that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants here for your valuable contribution and asking very important question to our keynote speaker and fellow panelists here. Since the target of attack in this session was the Fund for Responding Loss and Damage, and head of Fund for Responding Loss and Damage is here with us. We are very fortunate to have Ibrahima, Mr. Executive Director. So I would like to really give you time to respond the very serious, important question raised by our dear participant. You have a choice, but I prefer that if you speak from here, you will make your point in less time than from the podium.
Less than 2 hours?
Yeah. Okay. Over to you.
Well, first of all,
Mr. Executive Director.
I mean, I'd like to apologize to the panel members because they spoke so eloquently, but I get all the questions. And I assume that demonstrate really the interest that you have for the fund, and that's something very important to us. Let me, on the offset, just underscore, particularly to the community organization, to the CSOs in the room, the historical perspective you provided that led to the fund is certainly recognized as an important contribution that got us to where we are today. And if we give you any impression that was not actually appreciated, certainly it doesn't reflect the reality the way we see your role within the fund. And that's the reason why within the board, our board obviously has welcomed some observers from the civil society to join some of our discussion to make sure we're actually being informed by their perspective. And then second, as we develop the modalities, and I think some of the civil society here can confirm that, we do actually consult with the civil society to make sure we learn from your lessons, from the knowledge that you have, and make sure we get it right. It's an evolving process. It's not going to be an overnight process. And I can assure you, as a secretary, certainly will continue to consult and make sure that that experience that you have certainly is taken into account as we design the modalities going forward. I think second, and this is brought up, and I know this is a concern for many institutions, how do we make sure what I call the AAA of climate finance is availability, accessibility, and affordability of finance? There's no point in financing billions of dollars that are not accessible to as needed. So therefore, what we're doing concretely as a fund is to learn from the lessons from the fund and make sure the accreditation process, the modality are nimble and flexible to make sure the money will go to actually where it's needed. And I can assure you, both from the board and from the secretariat, as we design those modalities, our intention is to make sure it doesn't take 2 years, because loss and damage is particular. If the funding gets to where it's needed too late, you may not be able to actually save lives. So rapid response is such that we have to come up with something that's actually flexible. With regard to the resource mobilization, I do recognize our sister from South Africa the climate justice, the responsibility is such that obviously we're not saying that the funding will come entirely from the private sector. If you look at where we are today, the $766 million, to your point, are not generated out of resource mobilization. They came spontaneously as a contribution to the fund. So we haven't even started raising funding for the fund. We're just literally a voluntary contribution that came in, which we're working toward converting those pledges into active funding. So we make a commitment. But I think as we get to the longer term resources mobilization, it's important we recognize the billions that we need in order at least to really deliver going forward. I think last 2 points I want to make, and it's equally important, it is important, the fund's responsibility is not to determine the needs of the countries. It's the countries themselves who have to determine their own needs. And so therefore, when I hear some of the conversations, for example, from the panelists, the fact that they're working in helping the government to actually firm up their needs.
Please conclude. Yeah.
What, do you want me to answer the question or not?
Please answer.
I can stop here.
Briefly. No, I want you to answer this question.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Looks like I got a lot of questions.
Briefly, gentlemen, yeah.
I even got some of the questions in Nepalese and loss and damage. Let me answer the questions.
No.
Should I stop or should I continue?
No, please continue.
Okay, all right.
But
so I
please
think
be brief.
it's really important because this is really an opportunity to get to the bottom of the model that we're trying to design that takes into account the lessons that we learn, respond to the needs of the governments, future partnerships so that they can help the government, but eventually also make sure, as you talked about earlier, the importance of data and make sure at least when we talk about loss and damage is actually data-driven as opposed to a general statement about losses we're trying to address. So I can just assure you, since you asked me to wrap up, that our intention as a fund, being a startup fund, we have an opportunity here to learn from whatever mistakes that others have made to make sure we get it right. So the same efforts that took us to where we are today, I think collectively, if we use that, certainly we can make this fund to be successful, and by success I mean to be impactful to the communities that are affected by loss and damage across the vulnerable countries. Just a word of caution, if you spend too much time on the definitions and realizing the human face is much more important, we may get too academic and not get to the bottom of this, what this fund is all about, and that is really to respond to the needs of the community. And that's important that we can talk about academic conversation, which is important, but eventually it's bringing it back to the real world. And the real world, there are people that expect so much from us, and we can't fail them. So I could have spoke for 2 more hours, but let me stop here.
I know, I understand that. That's why you are appointed as Executive Director of Loss and Damage Fund, responding to the, yeah.
The score. The rest of my team is here. I am available, accessible at any time. Any great ideas that you have for us to get it right, we absolutely welcome you as the fund, because this thing is not just our fund, it's for all of us, and your contribution is highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahima, for your very honest answer to our very important participants' question, and also for your flexibility and also availability to talk to our fellow participant in an informal setting as well. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and also contribution to the debate. Without further ado, I would like to, with your permission of course, give 1 minute each expert panelist to respond the questions raised by our distinguished participant. Please, 1 minute each. From here, this, okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the engagement. So, because there was no specific question to me, I will be a little bit more generic in terms of responding.
Closing remarks.
Yes.
If you like it.
What I also said in the beginning, all fronts of climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and now loss and damage is bound to get a lot of resistance, right? That we know. I think that we have to be ready for.
That we can feel in the room.
Right. Now, also, if you agree, I have also seen an atmosphere, some resonance of L&D fatigueness, right? The voice that probably talking too much about L&D, we are deprioritizing, let's say, adaptation, right? So I think that's also, that at least I have heard that, I have felt that. So, but then linking to what you have said and others, the justice dimension, and the example from Limi just 2 days ago, you know, I assume it is from a glacial outburst. And what has people from Limi done to face that? I think the justice issue is very important. So I guess we have to be ready for struggle. I think that is definitely we have to it, and we have to have in mind it is about justice. And your question about, I think the struggle should be in terms of how to make it more simple, more accessible, I think. You know, looking at each case individual, I think that is not going to help. You know, I think we need to come up with a more broader kind of mechanism to access this. That is what I would say. But the road ahead is bumpy. Let's be ready.
Thank you.
Buckle up.
Thank you, Doctor. You, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, very quick, 2.5 points. So, Arunji spoke about multi-hazard risk assessment, and if we see that this is an event, so the prior to that is multi-hazard risk assessment, and after that is the loss and damage assessment. Most of the time, loss and damage assessment is a post-event process, and that complicates because there's a undulating capacities and expertise available in different places. If we have an effective multi-hazard risk assessment, we link it with the scenario building. We create some kind of a flexible but ready framework of loss assessment, particularly for most hazard-prone and vulnerable sites. The same way we do in the domain of chemical accident analysis, there we say that what-if analysis. So what if, okay, you just put the parameter and it will give some kind of scenario. Second point was related with the institution. India has a concept of community colleges. So formal educational system can opt for working with the communities and like a immersion program. This is a recent initiative, but we had the open university concept also, like the IGNU, and IGNU operates in Nepal also, I think, and some other this thing. And just to happy to share that IIT Roorkee, where my institution is located presently, is currently working with the government of Nepal to likely open a campus here in the IIT Roorkee Nepal campus. So that is also so. This is, and the last point, basically, that we need to work collectively to identify the case studies. May not be the perfect, but even the imperfect case studies, and that will help us identify the possible methodologies for addressing particularly the non-tangible, non-economic loss and damages.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make 3 points. One is on data. I think everybody is talking about data. So we need to have, in fact, at national level, systems for collecting data through formal structures and through informal structures, even going down to community level. So with the help of technology innovations, we must have systems established so that we are able to, when it comes to justifying, making an argument, we are able to make an argument with really good quality data. And the quality of PDNA also depends on data. If there is no data, PDNA results will not be good, and we will not be able to do much with those loss and damage assessment, and also with recovery also. So that's very important point. Secondly, on you talked about the caregiver role of women in this new PDNA guidelines. So UN Women is leading the gender dimension of PDNA, and then I think a lot of these kind of issues are being consulted with a range of partners, and we are hopeful that because PDNA is now being updated after a long time, that there should be more frequent revisions in future and updation as and when required, not at such pace which has happened in the past. And third point, I think as UNDP, we are working in several countries, and many times there are requests coming from government to just access fund, FRLD. What we are responding to them that we need to organize internally at national level, government see where are the gaps in policies, institutions, frameworks, financing, so that when they are accessing fund, that whatever fund they get is strategic. They are able to prioritize what is most important for them, so that they are not able to just do projects, but strategically address climate change related issues in a more meaningful manner, so that the scarce resources which are available to all of us, they could be very meaningfully deployed at national level. I'll stop here.
Very quickly. So about 2 questions about the communities. There is 2 representatives here related to the participation. And as we have the executive secretary here, it's very important not only the participation be about hear the voices, but in decision-making processes, and make sure that the communities have their assent, the place inside of the body. You know, that this is very, very crucial. And as we are in also governmental space, that there is a lot of countries here representative, think about how can we push inside the nationally, in the national countries, assemblies, councils, or kind of working groups that can also have communities to have participation on that, so countries can bring their position to the debate. And the last one is about the intangible losses funding mechanism that we're talking about. When you bring the issue of the reparations, exactly because of that, reparation is a political concept that not only concentrates in economy, but how can you of course, you're not never, it doesn't have a replaceable thing, but you can think about how can you create policies that really achieve and face that the impact, not repeat again. You know, and if they repeat, you have a better possibilities to face that, you know, with dignity. So I think it's that. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not going to summarize this discussion. Very rich discussion. I would like to thank all participants and distinguished panelists and our keynote speaker on behalf of organizer and government of Nepal. I understand that I was not able to do justice to all participants, neither to fellow panelists and keynote speaker. So government has given me a most difficult, ruthless job, but I would still like to thank government of Nepal for giving me this opportunity. I am very pleased and honored to have such a distinguished panelist and keynote speaker and very serious, enthusiastic participant from cross-section of not only Nepalese society, but also from all over the world. Thank you very much. I would like to conclude this meeting here.
Thank you so much to our keynote speaker, our distinguished panelists, and of course our moderator for your truly powerful session. Before we head towards the lunch, there is a small gesture of appreciation for your time and knowledge. So I'd like to request Mr. Thakur Prasad Gaire, Member of Parliament, to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Abrahima Chek Diong. I humbly request Mr. Thakur Prasad Gaire